More than 1 out of every 4 Philadelphians lives in poverty. More than 1 out of every 3 Philadelphia children lives in poverty. We are the 5th largest city in the United States, and we are also its poorest. So we're here today to talk about generational poverty and how we'll solve Philadelphia's most enduring problem. My name is Farah Jimenez, and I'm the president and CEO of the Philadelphia Education Fund. And my nonprofit tries to tackle poverty by improving learning, decreasing dropout rates, and connecting students to college and career success. And I'm joined today by Otis Bullock, Jr., an inspired and inspiring Philadelphian, the president and CEO of Diversified Community Services, and the highlight of a September 2016 Philadelphia Magazine article on generational poverty, which was authored by Stephen Bullock. So welcome, Otis.
Thank you.
Before we dive into the subject of hand, let's get to know you and your organization a little bit. Where did you grow up?
Oh, wow. I grew up in North Philadelphia, North Central Philadelphia. For the Philadelphians out there, 17th and Jefferson is where I grew up. It's Templetown now, but during the 80s, it was a high crime, high drug area.
And where do you live now?
Less than a mile away in the Strawberry Mansion.
Do you have siblings?
I have 14 siblings, half-siblings. I am the only child between my mother and my father, but my father had 7 other children, and my mother had 7 other children. So it's a pretty large family.
And when you were a child, what was your mother like?
Oh man, my mother was a young teenage mother. She was 15 when she had me. Up until that point, she was very smart, very studious. Probably would have became a lawyer herself if not for me. But she was very supportive. But over the years, she kind of had some drug addiction issues. So that factored into my life and growing up with my father.
And describe your father when you were a child.
My father, he didn't graduate high school, but he was like the consummate family man. One of his pride and joys is that he had 8 children, and all of his children, even though he didn't marry, all of his children grew up in a household with him. But on the flip side, being kind of a high school dropout, and he himself grew up in a poor environment. He also got caught up in drugs in a different way. So he sold drugs as a teenager to try to take care of his family. And what was very interesting about my upbringing with my father, even though he had sold drugs to take care of his family, my stepmother, whom he had his other 6 children with, we actually did grow up in a 2-parent household, in a household in which my father came home every day. So it was a very interesting upbringing growing up in 2 impoverished neighborhoods, one on 17th and Jefferson in North Central Philadelphia. But eventually my father moved us into what he called a better neighborhood. It's going to be better for us. And we moved to Mantua. And for those of you who know West Philadelphia, that's another tough neighborhood. But at least we had trees.
And describe your parents today.
My parents are, for me, my pride and joy. After all that they've been through in their life and going through what they've gone through, my father is now, he went from being a local drug dealer when I was a young kid. Now he's a deacon in his church. And my mother has been sober and clean for about 13 years. And she went on to receive her master's in human services.
And when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a fighter. And in my mind, I'm still a fighter. I just do a different kind of fighting. But I wanted to be a fighter because of my family. That's kind of what we value. We grew up in a family that were a family of fighters. We we actually had professional fighters in our family. And I actually found out through this story, when Steve Volk was doing the story with me, I found out that I didn't actually know a lot about my grandparents and my great-grandparents. And I found out that my grandfather was actually a fighter. So that kind of explained why my family liked fighting so much. So in the Bullock family, you had to know how to fight. And I did. I wanted to be a fighter. I wanted to be a boxer.
Well, I know you're still fighting today, so tell us about the organization that you're using to conduct your fight.
Well, I currently work for Diversified Community Services. And Diversified Community Services has been around for 400 years in the Point Breeze, South Philly neighborhood. And our focus has always been on children, youth, and family services. But just recently, I'd say about 2 or 3 years ago, what we decided to do is take our menu of services that we provide: early childhood education, affordable housing, housing counseling, mortgage foreclosure mitigation. And we decided to be more thoughtful about how we provide those services and not just provide a menu of services for people, but to really take a two-generational approach as to how we provide those services. And that's really what I'm here to talk about today, how you combat generational poverty. You got to take it 2 generations at a time. Most programs, they either focus on the adult or they focus on the child. Right? Everybody has the silver bullet to poverty. Right now, early childhood education is all the rage, whether you're talking to the mayor or the governor or even federal. But we have to understand that children don't exist in vacuums. They exist in families. So while we run quality early childhood education programs at Diversified Community Services, at the end of the day, those children still have to go home. And many of those children are going home to food insecurity. They're facing potential homelessness. They have parents who can't make ends meet. And it adds a lot of stress in the household, and it prevents them from being able to learn when they come back. So what we decided to do is that we were going to couple quality early childhood education with quality workforce development services for the parents, and also all the other support services that they need, so that we can tackle this 2 generations at a time. And I'll give you an example. At one of our early childhood education centers, we had a family that when they bought their blankets every week, they were bringing bed bugs to the center. And what typically happens in that situation is that, and we have a center of over 200 kids, you have to shut down the center. You have to provide a letter to all the parents telling them why you shut down the center. You got to bring out an exterminator, and you take care of the problem, which costs thousands of dollars. Well, that happened 3 times. And in any other center, what would have happened in any other ordinary center, they would have not allowed that family to come back. But at Diversified Community Services, what we did is that we not only had the exterminator come out to take care of our problem at the center, but we had the exterminator go out to the family's home to take care of the problem at the home, because we knew how important it was to stabilize that family and to keep those children in our center. So that's an example of the type of approaches that we take at our center that we consider to be 2 generational.
So talk about generational poverty. We know a lot about situational poverty, so that's a time-limited event, for example, a fire, some natural disaster, loss of a job, a divorce, may put someone in a moment of poverty, and then they have the ability to bounce back at some point with the right kind of help. Generational poverty is different. Describe it for us.
Well, I think Steve, in his article, Is There a Way Out, did it very well. And in the article, he kind of outlined the real story of Maddie McQueen, who was a client of ours at Diversified Community Services, and also my own story and how it parallels. Taking it back 4 generations all the way back to slavery. So my ancestry goes back to slavery, and each generation thereafter has been poor. And I've been fortunate to go to college, go to law school, and make it into a middle class status. But I also have 14 brothers and sisters who have not. And part of the problem is, in America, we like to believe in the American dream, that if you work hard, you would do well. But the reality is that if you're born poor, the likelihood that your children will be poor is highly likely, and the same vice versa if you're born wealthy. In fact, the Brookers Institute has a study that says it takes 5 generations to reverse the advantages or disadvantages that you have at birth. So if you're born poor, even if you do everything right, probably going to take you 5 generations to get out of that situation. And the same vice versa. You know, if you're born wealthy and rich, it take you 5 generations of screwing up to become poor.
I was struck when I ran a social service agency that around the holidays, when we would put out a call asking for gifts, that we would get a lot of lovely items for mothers, and we would get a lot of things for children, but often only for girls. And the takeaway from that experience is that many people think about generational poverty as single mother begets single mother who begets single mother, and we forget that there are boys in those families. So talk about generational poverty, and even the article talked about it really as a matrilineal issue. So talk about generational poverty from the perspective of a boy who became a man, who became a father.
Wow. That's pretty deep, and I never thought about it that way. I really didn't. But I can tell you, growing up as a young boy, there was always pressure to be tough, to be able to hold your own, you know, in the tough streets, as my father used to say. And in this story, it talks about a time when I was playing chess. So when I was a kid, I played chess, and I was very, very studious. And you always had to balance between being studious and being tough. And I was fortunate enough to come from the family that I came from, because my family was tough. So that toughness allowed me to be studious and not be bullied and things of that sort as a young man. And I remember I was playing chess alone, and one of the kids had stolen my chess piece. And my immediate reaction was, I gotta do something about that. And I took a soda can and I crunched it up and I flung it at him and cut his eye. And when I was in the principal's office and they asked me why I did it, it was very clear to me that it was something that I had to do in order to protect myself. But those are, in my mind, those are the things that young men, young boys have to go to. And that moment could have changed my life forever. That moment could have gotten me expelled. That expulsion could have prevented me from getting accepted to the high school of engineering science. And not going to the high school of engineering science could have prevented me from getting a scholarship to college. My life could be completely different just in that one moment. And I was very fortunate to have teachers and administrators at Bullock Middle School who really went out of their way to, in my mind, to save me, to see the greater good beyond my circumstances. And that's why this two-generational approach is so important, because, you know, we sometimes expect these young children growing up in difficult circumstances to somehow have a wherewithal to make it out all on their own. But they can't do it on their own. And that's why you absolutely have to stabilize the family at the same time while you're trying to educate young children.
And it's interesting, you talked a bit about the way you responded made absolute sense to you.
It made perfect sense to me.
Made perfect sense. And I liken it in a pretty trite way to when I was a young professional and I took a business etiquette course and had to learn, everybody knows that little BD thing you do with your fingers to know which one's your bread and which one's your drink. Because you don't always know the codes as you make your way through life. So can you talk a little bit about what new codes you learned about what is the behavior expected, for example, when you're in the middle class versus codes that exist when you're in a working poor family and trying to find your way out of poverty? There's a need to kind of decode and translate. How do you do that with the families you work, or how did you experience that when you were growing up?
I'll tell you what's interesting about the middle class, and now I'm solidly a part of the middle class, and my children are too. And there's definitely, you know, a different set of standards that we abide by. I mean, particularly like just the idea of going to college. I expect my children to go to college, and I don't see it as anything special. It's expected. Me going to college was a very big deal in my family because nobody had ever done it. It was a sign of making it when I went off to college, although I was still poor in college, right? My family didn't understand it, you know. My family never really understood that even in college, I needed the support. For example, I'm on the back end of the Generation Next generation, so I know what it's like to live without computers, but as I got up to college age, like, we finally got to that point where you could not live without computers, you know, 1996, 1997. And in order to get my coursework done, I needed a computer, and I couldn't afford it. And my family could not afford to buy it for me. I think those are type of things that middle class families don't necessarily consider. Because of course you need a computer, and of course when you go off to college, we're going to make sure that you have all those things. But I was very fortunate to have teachers. I don't know if is Florence Johnson in the crowd. Can you stand up for me, please? Can I embarrass you for a minute? Miss Florence Johnson, she's a fighter too. She was my middle school guidance counselor. She's known me since I was 10 years old, right? Miss Florence Johnson got me my first computer when I was in college, and I needed that, you know, coming from a family who didn't have means. But middle class, in the middle class, it's very simple. You're going to go to college. It's only a matter of what college you're going to go to. And I remember being at Westchester University, and I'm packing. I came to Westchester University with a duffel bag. That's all I had. And I see, you know, all of my peers. You know, their parents was there with them. They're unloading televisions. They're unloading video games. They're set for the year. They have everything that they need. And honestly, I didn't realize how poor I was until that moment. Until I realized how much of a disadvantage that I was working at just for being poor. And it lasts all through your life. You know, it wasn't just college, it was also law school and even up until now. So when you talk about generational poverty, I need folks to understand that one thing we can't do is blame the victim. We do have systems set up to actually keep people poor. And we got to start to address those systems, and we got to start to change those systems. And when it comes to, you know, government funding on the local, state, and federal level, I think we also got to change how we think about addressing poverty and think about how we fund these different systems. For example, I get funding for early childhood education. That funding does not allow me to support a parent who might be facing an eviction or who needs a better job to take care of their children. That funding does not allow me to do that. And I can go out and get some workforce development money, but that doesn't allow me to support a child in early childhood education. And what we need to do is start to find a way to braid this funding, to make the funding more flexible, so that we're not trying to attack this problem in a vacuum, but we're attacking it, you know, as a whole family, because, you know, children are a part of families, and families are a part of communities. But that's not the way we fund these problems, and that's why we're not solving it.
And you bring up an important point, which is often that for nonprofits, that the source of revenue that supports the work is delivered in a very discrete way. So to innovate solutions, to do this design that you have with the two-generation strategy is difficult to do because funding isn't aligned to facilitate that.
That's correct.
So we have a great audience here that I'm sure has been moved quite significantly by the story you've shared of your own experience, and of course that of those that you serve. So without question, I'm sure they're going to pick up their phones and in a moment make a donation to Diversified Community Services. So if you want to share your web address.
So our web address is www.dcsphillip.org. We can always be part on Facebook and Twitter as well. And we're always looking for opportunities to partner and do some innovative things. Some of the other innovative stuff that we're trying to do is actually start a for-profit business in order to fund our nonprofit efforts, so we can create more sustainable income for our programs.
So let's make the request broader than money, because money is important, but there are other ways that people can contribute significantly. So if you were to offer advice as to what people might do individually or do as a movement, what would be the one or two things that you would ask people to be involved in to help with the work that you're doing?
Well, what we're looking for right now are employers where we can create a pipeline for our parents to increase their income. We really need to give folks a chance to succeed. So we're looking for employers. So if you are an employer or you know a number of employers, please send them our way. One of the things, we're bringing Hartman College to Diversified Community Services. So we're hoping to create a pipeline for our parents to increase their incomes.
And I think you might want to close by sharing a little bit about your incredible program that started as an immigrant, as a program in Israel to prepare immigrant children for the academic rigors of an Israeli education, and yet it has found its way here in the United States and to Philadelphia thanks to you.
Yeah, well, we operate the first hippie program in the state of Pennsylvania. Hippie stands for not what you think it is. It's home instruction for preschool, for parents of preschool youngsters. And I don't know how many people watched the Democratic National Convention, but actually Bill Clinton, when he spoke on behalf of Hillary Clinton, he spoke about the hippie program. The hippie program started in Israel. Hillary Rodham Clinton brought it to Arkansas 30 years ago when she was the first lady of Arkansas. And it has been proven, the hippie program, to connect parents and teach parents to be their child's first teacher and improve educational outcomes for children all the way up through the 6th grade. And that's one of our critical and pivotal programs that we run out of our 2-gen program. And hippie has been evidence-based, and it's doing great. We've grown tremendously. We not only gotten funding from the Will Finn Foundation, Pew Charitable Trust, but we also just got another $200,000 grant from Vanguard for hippie. So we're doing very well with that. And hippie is really, I think, is the future of connecting early childhood education to parental engagement in a way that we haven't seen.
Well, I think what we'd like to do is thank you so much for introducing us to the work that you've been doing. It's been a pleasure getting to know you, and thank you so much for sharing your story and for continuing to be an incredible fighter, Otis. Clearly, there's a lot of work to be done, and I think you've energized people to the ways that they can themselves be involved. Congratulations.
Thank you.